Hey guys, welcome to my review of Godzilla King of the Monsters. This is going to be the sequel to the 2014 Godzilla film by Gareth Edwards. This film is directed by Michael Dougherty. It stars Millie Bobby Brown, Vera Farmiga, Ken Watanabe, and Kyle Chandler. So let's jump right into it. So the way I'm going to go about doing this review is I'm going to discuss some things that are good about the film. I'm going to go over some areas of improvement for the film. I'll talk about some things that are great as well as some things that are nerdy. This is a spoiler-free review, but I will say some of the nerdy stuff gets a little bit spoilery, but not too much. Nothing you'd really need to worry about. So let's talk about some good. I will say some of the human story is pretty good. Not all of it. I think that there's a little too much human story, but what is there, especially after viewing the film twice, I do think that the story is followable. I quite enjoyed it upon the second viewing. The audio, the sound design, the audio mixing in general is very good in this film. It was very, very fantastic to watch it in IMAX and PDX. The CGI is good at times, great at other times, and it falters sometimes, but I have that in all three categories. It's good sometimes. I think Millie Bobby Brown was good. I would have liked for her to do a little bit more in this film, but I think overall her character served its purpose, and I think she did a great job. Her performance was pretty solid. Vera Farmiga, same thing. Performance was solid. I think people complain a little bit about her motivations, but again, especially after the second viewing, I think it was easier to kind of understand it. And Kyle Chandler, he did a good job of selling like, hey, this giant monster killed my kid, and now I have to deal with that. And just his on-screen performance is pretty good. He chews up the scenery a little bit from time to time, but overall pretty good. G-Team. So I thought G-Team was actually kind of a disappointment the first time I watched the film. I know O'Shea Jackson Jr. who is also good, by the way. I know he talked a lot about his role, and he was like, they're the best of the best, and I didn't see it the first time I viewed the film. I will say, opening night, I was excited for this film for months. Opening night, I had one of the worst days I've had in a while, so I was a little distracted, and I guess I just missed some things. Second viewing, O'Shea Jackson Jr.'s character did really well, and I think G-Team was really cool. They do a lot of behind-the-scenes stuff. You can see how they're helping people, and they're also doing some pretty badass things as well. King Ghidorah, I'm going to put him in good and not great, and I'll explain that a little bit in just a second. The Orca, I will admit, during the marketing and the press releases and the articles and everything, I didn't quite understand what the Orca was, but I think it serves a pretty good purpose in this film. The setting, it's kind of confusing because I loved the settings. I just think there maybe was one too many. They really globetrot in this film, and I wish they kind of would have just stuck to one place a little bit longer and let it fester. Well, not fester. That's not a good word. Settle. Let the setting settle. And some story tropes, they take story tropes and they make them their own, which I think is great. That's it for good. So moving on to what I'm a little bit disappointed in, or areas I think the film could improve. One of the biggest things for me, and this is personal, is, and they do this to an extent, but do you remember the difference between trailer 1 and trailer 2? Trailer 1 had that like apocalyptic, classical music, really intense, deep feeling. And there are parts of that in this film, but for the most part, it's go, go, go. Drums, machine guns shooting at stuff, and it's cool and I like it, but I would have preferred Clair de Lune to appear in the film and to have more of that feel. I'm a huge sucker for that song, so I did love the film, but I would have liked a little bit more of that classical feel to it. I would say cut some character stuff. There are a few characters, there's just a few too many, and I think some of them have too many lines that they could have cut. But kind of thinking back on it, I don't really know what in the story they could have cut, but I do think that some of the characters and some of their lines could definitely be axed a little bit. An area of improvement that I think is kind of disappointing to me is Charles Dance. He's so cool, and when he's on screen, he definitely commands the room, but I feel like some of his line deliveries, they could have done a couple extra takes. I feel like in important moments of the film, he focuses on the wrong thing. Like there's this one scene where they're trying to do something, but Millie Bobby Brown speaks up. And then all of a sudden he's just like harping on, what did you tell your daughter? Like that's 10 out of 10 not important in this scene. And I just think his lines are kind of corny. I will say some of the character motivations are strange. The character I think was kind of confusing motivation-wise was Admiral Stenz. So in the first one, he's all about Godzilla. And in this one, I'm not going to say anything. And you're probably thinking, oh, well, you just spoiled it. No, like it's still confusing and it's still more in depth than that. But there's just something that happens with him And it's kind of like, well, what about the first movie? I don't know. It was just a little weird. So even though I had Ghidorah in the good, I will put him in this category. Not the disappointed notion so much as the just needs a little bit of improvement. Because Ghidorah is a huge threat to the world. He's scary. But he wasn't that big of a threat to Godzilla. And I'm going to kind of harp on two different points here. One, the DC thing that everyone thinks is a dream sequence, I'll just say this, it might as well have been. I would have liked to have seen it happen. The other thing is, Godzilla and Ghidorah have an ancient rivalry, but I don't think that Ghidorah necessarily is that huge of a threat to Godzilla. Like, he's a huge threat to the natural order and everything. But, okay, really quick, I'm going to get a little bit spoilery here. A little bit, not too much. Just about 30 seconds. Godzilla and Ghidorah fight 3 times. 3 times. They swing, they both take some blows from each other, but Ghidorah never really just straight up like sets the emotional tone for why Godzilla is so apt for going after him. Yeah, so back to non-spoilers. I'll just leave it at that. I wrote down a couple less comedic lines. There was too many funny guy moments, and I think they could have done with 1 or 2 less. But the comedy was still good. I will throw some of the comedy back up to the good section, but there was just a little too much of it. They still do the thing a little bit, and I understand human and ground perspective, but they do the thing where you want to see something happen, and they kind of cut away from it. There is a fight between 2 kaiju that would have looked awesome, but it doesn't look awesome, but it was awesome, if that makes sense. Maybe in the future, leave the camera on the fights for a little bit longer. But still, I mean, there still are many moments where they do that. It's just there is 1 or 2 where I was like, Kyle Chandler. And I like Kyle Chandler, but you get what I mean. And last one here, Godzilla's roar. Well, it was awesome every time it happened in the 3rd act for some reason. So you ever go to take a deep breath, but you like cut it halfway, and then when you breathe out, you still feel like you need to take that full breath? I felt like that's what Godzilla's roar was like. Why do I say things? An easier way of explaining it is I feel like he didn't breathe in enough for some of these roars. Like he kind of breathed in, and then like the roars were kind of quick and short. And I guess that could be a throwback to like the older Godzilla films where he kind of does that. A little bit like that, but nitpicky. And also the trailer shows everything, almost. All right, now onto my favorite section, the great. And this is a shorter list, but what's great is great. And one is Mothra. She is the MVP. She is the queen of the monsters. She is the coolest part of this movie. Her and Godzilla. I'll put them together. Mothra's character was done so true to form and to how she's been in the past, and so accurate of a character. I personally love her design. She's the MVP. Also Godzilla, like I said, he's a badass. He does great in this film. Just because he can't talk doesn't mean he's an unintelligent creature. You really get the sense that he is what this world's about. He is the driving force for why the world is still kicking. And yeah, and you see that, and he's just fantastic. Rodan, the Rodan scene, I would have paid $10 just for that. You could have just showed me that whole scene. That was like one of the most heart-pounding moments of the film. And you see a lot of it in the trailer, but just seeing it play out in sequence, what Monarch does, who Rodan meets up with, that sequence is one of the best. The CGI is also great at times, so I have that in all 3 sections. There's some where it's just good. There's some where I literally thought Ghidorah looked a little corny, and then there's some where it's like, wow, where did they find Godzilla? Like, where did they actually find this monster? And the final act as well is good for the most part. Again, there's a couple little nitpicky things like cutting away, but for the most part, what happens in it is like, if you were impressed by what Godzilla does in 2014, I think you're really going to be rooting for him in this one. There's a little cool part. Godzilla's got a little apartment. Ken Watanabe, he's also very good in this. He usually just kind of sits in the back and says cool things, but now he does cool things. And he's got some very emotional moments and very good lines. I was very impressed with his performance. Yeah, you get the old gods feel. You get like what this could mean for the future of the Monsterverse. Hopefully there is one. I hear it's not performing that well in the box office, but hopefully it can kind of pick up and gain traction. I hope there is a future of the Monsterverse because I'm really enjoying this. And of course, the music. This is actually kind of segueing right into the nerdy. Godzilla has his original theme back. And Bear McCreary does a fantastic rendition of it, and Mothra also gets her original song. Now, Mothra's song isn't sung, like you don't hear like the twins or anything, singing it. It's all instrumental, but it is freaking fantastic. And also, we're in the nerdy section. This is a little bit spoilery, but it's more Easter egg stuff. It's nothing really that plays to the progression of the story or anything. So, Mothra twins. There's a little reveal, I won't say where, but if you're looking out for it, it is like right in your face on camera, but you do got to be paying attention to the film. Because the first time I saw it, again, I was distracted and I was like, how'd she get there? But then like the second time I watched it, I was like, oh. There's a cool little callback to, I believe his name is Brooks' character from Kong Skull Island. There's an older version of him in this scene too. Godzilla's 54 roar. You hear it a few times, or at least a really close rendition of it. I believe when he makes landfall in the third act, you hear it, and it's like the original one. And I just remember sitting there in the theater being like, oh my God, I never thought I would hear that roar in a movie theater. And that was so cool. Ghidorah. The way they made Ghidorah fly looks so good. I can't believe they made it look like that creature can fly like that. But somehow it also looks like the original like Showa era, how he kind of just hovers at an awkward angle and sometimes flaps his wings and sometimes doesn't. It's just the way his movement was just like spot on. I was super impressed with that. There is mention of why Ghidorah is the way he is. I'm not going to say any more, but if you're a fan, you understand what I mean. And there's mention of it. It's fact. It's canon. Awesome. I like it. This one's a little bit obvious, but the kaiju attacks are true to form. Mothra has her little silk attack. Ghidorah has his lightning. Godzilla does things Godzilla's done, and it's awesome. I don't know if Rodan ever had any specific attacks besides just flying and destroying everything below him, but that's in it. This movie is just a Godzilla fan's dream. I think Michael Dougherty did a fantastic job being like, what are some of the most beloved things that have happened throughout the Godzilla franchise, and how can I put this together for everyone to like, but also have it be new and be a followable enough and a decent enough human story that I think at times does shine. Also with the complete and utter spectacle of just watching kaiju titans of this scale fighting for the first time, destroying cities. And it was just so good. It was jarring to me from the Godzilla film from 2014 compared to this one. I've been thinking about it for a couple of days. It's one of those kind of slow burning, like I'm just thinking about it more and more. I'm just super impressed. I really enjoyed this film. I would give it a B+. There are enough things story-wise, character-wise, dialogue-wise to kind of knock it down into the B zone. But everything else lifts it up. It is really enjoyable. I highly recommend you go see it in the theaters. Let me know what you guys think if you've already seen the film. So like this video and subscribe to my channel if you haven't already, and I'll talk to you in the next one.